we want to talk a little bit about how the startups and the corporates work together, because I think it's very important, and it's not only about investing, but really day-to-day business. People call it open innovation. Before we go into a lot of detail, I want to introduce and give actually the new people on stage the chance to say who they are. Why don't you tell us who you are, what your job is, Itziar?
So my name is Itziar Estevez. I'm working with Siemens Venture Capital. I've been doing that for the last 6 years now. Should I introduce my fund a little bit as well?
Yeah, go on. So you have 1 minute.
1 minute. We invest in all areas of activities of Siemens, which is industrial technologies, energy, infrastructure and cities, and healthcare. And we've been doing that for a long time now, over 30 years, more than 120 investments. And we invest worldwide. We have a team in Boston, California, Munich, and Beijing, with about 15 investment professionals. Historically, we've been doing more round B, round C type of investments. 2 years ago, we recognized that there was a gap in the market on the early stage side, so we were missing on opportunities, and we launched an early stage fund called Industry of the Future Fund. We've done 6 investments out of these funds, so now we are more flexible in the stage of the companies.
And you are an investor in Tado, too?
Yes, indeed.
And another one. Happy. Yeah, good. Ines, tell us a little bit about your job and your company.
Yeah, Ines Bergmann. I'm representing EON Innovation Scouting and Strategic Co-Investments. We are the CVC arm of EON. By now, more than 3 years in operation, with offices in Essen, Germany, and in San Francisco, US. And for this year, our key objective is to maintain and manage our portfolio of 15 portfolio companies we have by now, and of course, strategically, wisely complement this portfolio in 2016.
With a couple of new deals?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to hint at, but making it a good complement.
All right. Matthias, Statkraft Ventures.
Yeah, thanks. My name is Matthias. I run Statkraft Ventures, a venture capital fund focused on everything disrupting energy markets. We are backed by Statkraft, the Norwegian hydropower group. We have 100 million to invest over the next 10 years in startups. And we actually a startup ourselves, so we started a good year ago. I think I was here last year.
No problems with funding.
Yeah, that's true. So we're happy to do a couple of more deals this year, really taking a broader look at energy, so really everything that has the potential to change those energy markets. And we've seen quite a few of those firms today. Is interesting for us.
Are you active as an open innovation channel into Statkraft? Do you work in this direction too?
I think there's 2 answers to that. I mean, very formally, like we're really a separate entity, and we really make sure that there's Chinese walls in the first place between all the stuff that startups tell us, and they have to tell us because we need to understand them. So we won't pass that on to anybody in the large corporate group, because we treat that really confidential, and we think that's important to respect that need for confidentiality. But on top of that, obviously, I mean, there is quite a large potential to cooperate, to work together, and the way we do it, like very formally, we just ask the founders ahead of time, like, would you mind if I introduce you to a colleague, or can I share your pitch deck? And if we get that, okay, then we do it. And I think there's lots of interaction that we already triggered, but I mean, the first and foremost criteria for us is we want to keep the founders' need for confidentiality as a default setup. And we can talk later about like how we do all that stuff, but I think we should start introducing ourselves.
I want to ask you, because we already know who this gentleman is.
No, I didn't waste any time on introducing myself.
Yeah, okay. But you have you are working with a French utility, I understand, right?
Yeah,
EDF.
EDF.
Give us a little history about this relationship, how it started, how it went into
maybe
operation,
let me give a more generic answer. So first of all, I think it's very important that corporates, well, particularly if they become shareholders, that they help. I think it's obvious that there are ways that work directly or indirectly. So of course, a utility can also push you very much by just being a customer. and presenting the necessary traction to then convince further potential stakeholders, shareholders, other customers. And of course, they can work with money. They have a lot of it. Yeah, it might not feel like it today, but it's a question of relations, obviously. So I think we found out that corporations change very quickly. So in 2014, there were some decisions taken in France that then eventually influence then the whole chain of command, that then can lead to some, let's say, pauses in decision-making processes, which is, I think, by now pretty normal. So that is not specific. I think that just happens with corporations, so that people move within the framework. And if you have a corporate sponsor that isn't fully institutionalized, but that is kind of personalized, and that people move on, then it can be challenging, of course, because that slows down process. So that became, I think, a challenge over the last 2 years in our case, which I think now has been overcome successfully. With EDF participating in the last round we closed last week.
Last week. He forgot to tell us before. Yeah. But what did you learn from this relationship with the EDF? Ups and downs, pauses, hyperactivity. How can you better manage a relationship? If you are a startup and you are maybe a new startup, not everybody here in the room is a late stage startup with many super well-working corporate relationships. What is the lesson learned from your side?
I think realistic expectation is foremost important, which means that as a founder, in particular, where you want to just get it done, whatever it takes, you might fall to the illusion that you get it managed somehow. So if there are some obstacles, typical reaction has to be, I get it managed, yeah? So if the corporation is whatever, you say, well, I will manage them. You won't. So they manage themselves, which is pretty obvious, but if you are close to closing a round, then you might overlook that detail, and I think it's an important one. To be really realistic about what can be achieved in which time frame. So everything can, but what is realistically to be expected? Yeah, that's the trick.
Can I comment on that?
Of course.
Because I think it's a great point, and I think what's also important to understand the role that corporate venture vehicles can have, because usually, I mean, at least we have a limited influence on the large group of Statkraft. So we tend not to overpromise on what we can deliver on the synergy side, as much as we try, but I mean, it's really nothing we price in a deal, or we can promise, or we can actually really be sure to deliver. We still try hard, but I mean, I think it should be two very separate things. Like the financing part should be good standalone, and then you should really work on finding all those synergies that might be there, but it's usually two tracks. And usually, I don't know about you, but the venture capital units can be a catalyst for that, but definitely not a guarantee, and I think it should not be mixed.
Could you help us to install sockets in Norway?
Yeah, good. Not me personally, right?
So but you know someone to call.
Yeah, but I couldn't guarantee. I mean, if I would make an investment in your case...
And I don't guarantee that we will, but we might.
We should, yeah.
But I actually like to add on, and that's why I believe the corporate venture capital arm can play a key role in making the relationship successful, is because we believe that they can be the continuous point of contact in that changing corporate world, and that we can help the startup maneuver that corporate world when it changes, and translating also what might not be obvious to the startup, the next reorg, the next change, and can put this in context to the expectations, the things might have happened. And I see this as a key role that we perform, that we continuously act as this translator, this mediator, and being the continuous point of contact from the very first to the longer term growing relationship over time.
One thing that we do as well to ensure that there's a good collaboration happening afterwards is to engage with the business unit very early on. So in fact, we need the sign-off of the BU for...
You need a go decision from them in order to invest?
And that's something that we want. So we need this strategic focus and to see a concrete opportunity within a business unit to do business either immediately or soon after. And that's a guarantee almost that something is going to happen after the investment.
And what do you do if the go decision of a BU, a business unit, doesn't really come? But you really love the startup and you really want to invest. What do you do?
So we check really early. We check right after almost the first call, we will check with the BU. If they really don't want and we understand the good reasons, then we won't push for it. We can do exceptions. It has happened that we've done it only on financial objectives, but we tried not to we could potentially, but we don't want to overrule the business unit, so we move on. If we see that we cannot convince them, it's another data point maybe as well. So we
Do
go
you
with
need
it.
business unit support
Yeah.
before you can invest?
I'm already ready to pick up the question as well. So we absolutely do that. So the point of time when that needs to happen or the extent can be very different, or how many business units that might be, but there needs to be some interest and intent to work with that startup at some point of time. But however, the key learning I think that we made over time is, yes, it's very important to have the interest, but how do you spark that interest? So on the one side, it's definitely the top management, and you need that commitment and buy-in, but that's just only one side. And the other side, it's really you also need the working force on the ground. If they don't believe in the solution, if that's cannibalizing what they do, then they will block. So to get them also early in and make them part of that project, make them work together, get them familiar with the startup is also a key task and something we try very hard. It's not easy, but something we try to make happen.
We kind of see ourselves as salesmen of that startup within Statkraft in our case. So that's more the role that we take, without having like the necessity to have a formal cooperation in place for an investment.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
If you talk to independent VCs, they say, well, their big advantage is that they do not need this internal sponsor because this not invented here reflects, in particular with regard to something, well, truly innovative, can also be truly risky, hasn't been done here, hasn't been done before, is not quite what we're doing, have a different approach. You know, if you try to pitch Ubitricity in a utility that's at the very same time installing high-end fixed installation, very high power, very high CapEx, very relatively, yeah. Then you go down to the particular experts, and of course the very, very particular experts that have supported, selected, and invented the system are asked, what about this? So I think it's a very natural answer then not to like it. And isn't that a challenge for corporate venture? I mean, how is it obviously is, but how is it overcome?
I don't know how you handle it, but the way I see it, I mean, there's a large pool of know-how in a large company, right? There's PhD for everything in Statkraft that I can ask, but I don't have to, I mean, take their advice at face value, right? So, I mean, they might be biased, but it's still good to know their opinion.
Oh, yeah.
And then we still can decide like however we want, but it would be just stupid to ignore all that know-how out there.
No, not about ignoring, but it's eventually, I mean, it's crystal ball-like risk evaluation and assessment.
Yeah. I think it's also linked to the timeline, so it depends on the stage of the company. If it's a very early stage company, it's obviously hard to integrate it or to have immediate business happening. But if it's a mature company and there are people that on the technical side don't see how this could fit together, then it's an interesting dialogue to have. If the management does have the vision and the technical guys don't know how to bridge this gap, then you are already generating value internally by having these discussions.
Yeah, that is exactly what it took us to come into contact with, let's say, more conservative players. Yeah.
Ines, I want to ask you, many of the corporates, they promise adding revenue. For example, these guys did today. We help you guys add sales. And let's go and look at a couple of examples. You are famous for investing in American startups. Some of them, or quite a large number of your portfolio is American, then you are a channel for them into the European market. Can you give us a couple of examples where you actually rolled them out into your customer base and generated revenues and how that worked?
Yeah, sure. So, of course, the extent of revenue depends on how mature the solution is, but to give you a very good example is a company called, US-based company called First Fuel. And we started already working on early on, and they're one of our earlier investments. And when we actually started, and parallel to investment, we had one deal, made in one particular business unit and one particular regional unit using one particular solution for them, but being rolled out to a quite significant amount of customers. So giving them a very steady revenue base to start on.
Which country was it you started
in UK, actually.
In the UK.
And now, over time, we see that it's actually a solution that is being now picked up by other market units, but also that we now see interest for other of their applications also in the group. Has taken some time to develop this and to spark that, but the key point is here, we might start off with something, but together with the company, it can lead to the fact that we grow it further and even grow it further in different applications. But there might be also the case that, of course, you see, okay, it just fits for that one market and it stays like that, but of course, if the company is also interested in growing and developing, we are very happy to scale it across and help grow the revenue significantly. And First Fuel is a good example of that one.
Did you already help Tado generate extra revenue?
You might ask them. I don't think in cash. So, as I said, we try to be useful, connecting them. And maybe just beyond that one example, I think like 1/3 of all the startups that we have seen, that we've been in touch with, like 1/3 of our deal flow, has one relation with somebody else in Statkraft. Like whatever kind of level, like for cooperation, for joint research. But we really trying to encourage that. But my only point is you cannot impose synergies on anybody, right? You cannot make it a contractual obligation to be synergetic at all. That's, I think, what's important.
So it's actually a soft promise, yeah? You are actually saying we will be trying to generate revenues for you, but we can't promise. Is it convincing for the founders? Would it be enough, such a soft promise for you?
Well, at least it corresponds to the business plan, right? Yeah. Which is de facto also a soft promise, as everyone knows. I mean, I think it can be said so. Ours isn't, but I think it's just a realistic view on it.
Is EDF planning to roll you out big time, or is it?
It will help if this is being rolled out in southern England, and it's for them. It's well, let's start in Belgium and UK, let's say. Right?
But before they let you into France, you really have to.
They don't.
Prove a lot.
No, they don't. We cooperate. I mean, there is no European virtual power grid if France is not included. If you do not include French players into that idea, then it cannot become European. So it's fine that this is handled by EDF. So that's the plan.
Ines, how much do you like Ubitricity as of today?
We're looking at it. That's the case, and talking to the business about applications.
By the way, what I didn't mention is that we shipped first components to State Grid in China, and the relation between State Grid and EDF is almost like EDF to Ubitricity, which I find interesting regarding sizes. But that is, I think, very interesting as well. So it's not about only Europe, so we're also in contact with LA, with Palo Alto, to at least see something green starting there that supports the vision of that this can become, well, more than a German or European solution.
What I found, sorry to interrupt, what I found it helpful in order to make this happen and work, it was to always repeat the same process over and over again, so have a very clear strategy and work with the same business units on different deals, sometimes on the same topics, so that you have a deal-making machine that knows how to work. It improves quite quickly once you repeat the process.
I want to come back to your original question on the revenues and give it another spin. I think there is this, what can we bring as revenues as E.ON, but I think there's also a key component, and we see that with also a couple of our portfolio companies, that maybe once we have gone in, we made a pilot, we did some feasibility testing, it gave the company tremendous visibility and proof points, and then of course others come and also contract that solution, and that suddenly grows the company and the volumes significantly. So that is also another, besides the pure individual deal, also a key component we help in many cases bring to these companies.
And in the case of Termondo, one of your German, you don't have so many German portfolio companies yet, but how far are you with Termondo in generating revenues with them? Because they are kind of going directly to the market and not so much white labeling it for you guys, right?
Yeah, we're learning, we're experiencing, there are also first signs, so we are positive that it will also go to revenue generating also on our side at some point.
And Matthias, now Inven has joined Tado, right?
Which is great.
We learned today. And now Tado is a multi-utility startup, yeah? They have more than one utilities backing them. How does it feel to be not the only utility being invested, and how is the competitive situation between more than one utility with Tado, and how do you foresee it in the future?
I mean, I think it's great to have Inven on board, very great, because it's great people also, and I think it's going to help the company a great deal forward. And one reason for that is that there is no strategic interest formalized whatsoever from either investor. I think not from Siemens, not from Statkraft Ventures, not from Inven. I think we're all trying to build the best company with the best exit value. And there's no directions towards any exit scenario that each of us gives the company, and no corporate VC ever should. So I think it's great because it's accelerating growth. It doesn't hinder any exit opportunities. And I mean, the more angles you have that can provide additional value from just customer base, for instance, from our Norwegian aspect, the better. I mean, there's no conflict whatsoever.
And Ines, you have a co-investment with RWE in Bitchly. Can you tell us a little bit about this multi-utility syndicate?
No, I think it's absolutely a way we need to look at, and I think in the end it will help the business, the industry, and the companies. Of course, on the commercial side, you need to have a look where there might be overlaps, but I think this can also be discussed from the investor perspective. Absolutely, we're very open to this. We see that it helps the company, and it very perfectly quoted as one of these examples where we have gone through a long process looking at this company, testing them, and now it has helped them spark the interest of other utilities here in Europe, and I think that's a perfect example, and we as investors like that. And on the commercial side, of course, you need to find your solutions, but I think in the end, those solutions are still, they need this to really grow. You need several people making this happen, and there we are not necessarily competitors anymore, but we can only bring this transition together forward.
And Itziar, do you have situations where Siemens is investing in startups and other competitors also co-invest?
Constantly, and I think it's a reality of the corporate VC world, so there's no point in trying to avoid it, really. I think sometimes we do have some conversations internally with some BUs who says, oh no, if this player is in, we don't want to contribute to his success, but that's only on the less sophisticated side. They quickly understand that there's no way around it. We better find a way of investing with or without our competitors, whatever is in the specific case.
Knut, you have been a lawyer before you became a startup entrepreneur, right? So you know pretty well what a right of first refusal is. Is it something that many corporates insist on, that you talk to in the new funding round, or do you think, I also pass on that question to you guys, is this a concept of the past? Because it's not even important. I know from you guys that rights of first refusal is not important, but what is the current situation in your experience, and then maybe we can pass this on to the other panelists.
Well, when it's not corporate strategic, but strategic, I think it's pretty natural to expect, because it's not exit-driven business, but the selection of opportunities for your own future business. So I wouldn't expect someone to have it negotiated away from the direct involvement of a strategic. When it comes to corporate VC, that is true VC or positions itself, it's only natural that you can request to waive such clause. I mean, Otherwise, you aren't exit-driven, pretty obvious. So it's either or. So therefore, I think it's only consistent than without. But I thought you might ask about antitrust issues, which was my true profession. So the whole Ubitricity stuff is about regulatory and how it works. And coming to regulation, in our case, multi-jurisdictional means multi-utility, because the most important business process for utility obviously is then the respective energy law that is nicely modeled with meetings in ministries. And if you want to change something there, you have to be realistic and to get involved with an internal player, and even more so if you have to influence on European level. So we found by now are mentioned in a couple of German codes, yeah, but if it comes to other jurisdictions, would be good that this is obviously allowed, there are no hurdles, and with that I want to come back to GreenCom. So the full potential of what is already there technology-wise can only be harnessed if regulation adopts to what now is possible technically, and this requires that you involve the utility because they own the regulation, if you look at it really realistically. In the short term. In the long term, no, but in the long term we're all dead, but in the short term it's owned by the local incumbent monopolist, right? So get them on board.
On the right of first refusal topic, so I think there are several options viable for startups. At Siemens Venture Capital, we don't take a right of first refusal because we are financially motivated. We are part of Siemens Financial Services, so we need to bring financial returns. We actually found that it's a quite risky strategy as well to just rely on the right of first refusal and wait, because then you still have to pay the full value that the competitor is offering. So it's also not necessarily solving all the issues. And what we found more helpful was to, throughout the investment and the partnership, just prove that Siemens is a good house, good home for the company, and that it makes sense ultimately from a cultural and product fit perspective to get together. And we had that actually last year happening, where we invested a couple of years ago in a company called Polarion, which is based in Stuttgart in the application lifecycle management space for embedded systems. And it was very successful. We invested first, then there was a collaboration partnership in place. And very soon afterwards, both Siemens and the company realized that it makes absolute sense to just sell to Siemens instead of starting a bigger process and taking the risk of being acquired by someone else.
And then at the London event, your colleague Michael Hochholzer, he told us that Siemens acquires around 10%.
Yeah, 10-20%.
10 to 20% of the portfolio.
Which we think is a healthy balance, a natural balance, just looking at the topics that we invest in.
But you are a technology company, and you are not yet a real technology company. I always ask the utilities, how will you manage to become a technology company, and do you actually foresee to acquire some of these technology startups in order to help you become a more technologically oriented corporate?
So I cannot give an exact answer on what will the percentage be. I mean, our portfolio now, we come at the stages where these options start to be discussed. We haven't seen it yet, but we are definitely considering it at some point as an option. But I think it's also something you need to prepare the company for. Something where you need the learnings, and I think we have been in this phase of starting on that smaller level, on the partnership level, and taking it the next level. I think that's to work on the next years, but I'm pretty positive that we will see that as well.
Yeah. Do you have a mandate from Statkraft that you also look for acquisition opportunities inside, outside your portfolio, both?
No, I think as far as rights of first refusals are concerned, there shouldn't be any for any corporate venture capitalist at all. But then again, I mean, if Statkraft would acquire any of my portfolio companies, would be great, probably, but they're fully aware that it has to be at market price in a process with other competitors. And that's fair. I mean, that's just fair. And so that's more of the role. We just build that portfolio, and if it works, fine, but not at the effect of compromising on exit value.
Okay. Let's make a final round of one advice that you give a startup to work better together with a corporate. Itziar, your turn.
I think it's really to take time to understand the constraints of both sides. So when it takes to time to deployment of a joint offering, something like that, it's important to understand the constraints of the large corporates. They will typically try to bundle it with some new release or with an internal campaign. So understanding those would help set expectations on the startup side and vice versa, of course.
Ines?
Yeah, for me, it's a lot around dialogue and continuous dialogue. So keep that dialogue with the CVC arm, but also with the business units. And do not think because you're just in one unit and maybe have a good knowledge about the executives there. It's continuous work and continue building these relationships. That's in the end what will make you successful also in the corporate world. It's not one-off.
So if you are a startup and you have a corporate venture capitalist on board, try to make that board member your business developer or your salesman.
Great. It will help sales. Cool idea. Knut?
That's a good one if you're there, I think. But how to get there? Start smaller. Start smaller. It's from our experience, much better to have a quick first small step instead of making projects so interesting that everyone wants to be part of the decision and then it gets postponed and postponed.
Yeah.
So start small and do it not only with one, right?
Okay.
So have a little competition, which actually is not felt as being insulting, right? How could you dare? It just helps. Others are dealing with it as well, which means the likelihood of taking a wrong decision, which cannot be understood by anyone in the market that you've taken only, solely, lonely, and then getting fired is drastically reduced if someone else does it as well. So do it with others. Yeah, but have your favorite and tell them and be honest.
Okay, I like the idea of honesty, and let's finish this wonderful panel with a big round of applause. Thank you.